Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Barry Milne Tokuingua. I'm the director of the Compass Research Centre, and welcome to the annual Compass Colloquium, the 16th one that we've had. Normally we run these in August, always at Stats New Zealand, always in Wellington. This year, because of a COVID spike, we decided to delay it. So we're here in October, which is fine. We've got a packed program. Thank you all for joining us here. Thank you also for all the people who are joining on Zoom. Okay, malo ni, and welcome to Tokelauan Language Week. It's very appropriate that it's Tokelauan Language Week this week that we're having a colloquium, because the talk coming up shortly with Offa Dews and Lisa Underwood will talk about work that we're doing with the Tokelauan community. It's members of the Tokelauan community there that we visited in Pororua. When was that, Offa? That was over a year ago now, just getting this project up and running. The theme for Tokelauan Language Week this week is Hala Hala ki Vavau Kai Ke Mo ki Pale o Tokelau, which is probably pronounced badly, but what it means is to plan for the future is to understand the past. And what Offa's going to be talking about is working with the Tokelauan community to understand how they are coping with chronic conditions. And just another picture there too, that's Offa there in the middle front with the Tokelauan Community Workshop in Wellington. She'll talk a little bit about all the engagement she's been doing with the Tokelauan community as part of this research. Okay, so this is what we've got for today. I've got an elongated introduction. It probably won't take the 30 minutes, but we'll see how we go there. And that's an introduction to what we do at Compass, what we're doing at Compass right now, but a little bit what we've done over the years. As I say, it's a 16th colloquium, so I've been running that long. I've been around at Compass for, what's that, 2010, since I joined Compass. And then we'll move on to Lisa and Offa's talk about the impact of chronic conditions on families across the life course, one of our projects that's funded by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. And then we'll hear from Arazu Malihi over there, who is kind of a Compass affiliate, talking about work that she's been doing that's funded by, is that the Auckland Medical Research Foundation that's funding that work, looking at settlement trajectories of refugees in New Zealand. And then just before we break for lunch, which again will be just out there, served to you, I'll talk a little bit about work, well, an app that we've put together to help people with the integrated data infrastructure. As I'll talk about shortly, we work a lot with the integrated data infrastructure and are starting to create a few widgets to help people use the integrated data infrastructure. And again, probably won't take the 15 minutes, but I'll talk briefly and show you through the app that we've created that allows people to search for variables in the IDI, because as I'll say at the time, the most common question I was asked about the IDI is, does it have data on X? And sometimes I knew the answer and sometimes I didn't. So after a number of askings, I decided we should create an app that does that very thing, so people could just go to there. So I'll talk about that. Then we'll break for lunch. And then 3 talks in the afternoon. The first by Comey and Martin, neither who are here at the moment, but they'll turn up later, about work we do that does involve the integrated data infrastructure. So we're the New Zealand reps actually for the International Social Survey Program, which, as they'll talk to you about, is a different social science surveys run every year where they change the topic year on year. I should remember what this year's one is, but I will get to that in a few slides time. Last year was healthcare, next year is citizenship and national identity. And they run the same survey roughly 10 years apart. And what the cool thing about that is you can compare across countries and also look at how countries have changed over time on these various social attitudes. Then I'll finish up with a couple of talks. The first one is the Better Start National Science Challenge that I've been involved with for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's kind of winding up a little bit, although I've got a year and a bit to go. So I'll talk a little bit about the research that we've been doing on that as part of the big data theme. That's what I lead, and that works with typically the IDI, but other big data sources. And then after that, to finish up, I'll talk about a paper that myself and colleagues have put together, colleagues from Michigan, well, another colleague from University of Auckland, colleague from Michigan, and a colleague from Denmark, talking about how population level administrative data, such as you get in the IDI can be used for developmental science. And that was the thing that struck me when the IDI was being mooted and first got underway, is I think in terms of cohorts and starting with people and following them through over time. And really, it's set up beautifully to do that sort of research with some fish hooks along the way, which I'll talk about. Okay, so who are Compass? We're a team that does quantitative social science research that's almost exclusively externally funded. So the university funds us a tiny amount, but for the most part, we need to put in grants to keep these people employed. So I'm the director and been the director for the last 5 years. I took over from Peter Davis, who was the founding director of Compass. And before there was a social science research unit that sort of morphed into Compass. Senior research fellows, Lisa over there, who you're going to hear from shortly. Roy Lei Yi, who is just finished up really, but still doing a bit of work I'll talk about shortly on loneliness across the life course. Senior lecturer Steph D'Souza, who's on maternity leave at the moment, but has been involved in a number of projects, including with Better Start. Research fellows, Komi Kalundai Matchett, who you'll hear from later this afternoon. Offa, who's here at the front, and Chao Lee, who does a lot of analytical work in the IDI. Martin, who you also hear from later on, talking about the International Social Survey Program. And Eileen, who is here at the back. Two of our data analysts, and our other data analyst is Lois, working on various things, including work on a program of research with Jane Harding that I'll talk about shortly. And then a number of students. Those are our, 3 PhD students there and 1 master's student. Natalia's just handed in, actually. Liza will be handing in towards the end of the year. She did some work on the longitudinal census. She actually started doing that work before the IDI came around, or at least it was made available widely. And the longitudinal census was the thing to work on. Eileen's doing some work on linkage bias, which she gave a talk on last year. And Francesca is doing a master's at the moment, but looking to turn that into a PhD, working on the New Zealand Rugby Union data that's in the IDI and looking at health and mental health outcomes as a function of playing rugby. Okay, so I touched on a few things that we've been working on. Here's a list of things that we're kind of on at the moment or are just moving on from. Ordered in terms of when they finished. So that first one is working with Dame Jane Harding at the medical school at the University of Auckland. She has, over a number of years, worked on a number of neonatal trials to do with various things. One of the main ones is to do with corticosteroids given in pregnancy and looking at the long-term outcomes, or early in birth, and given the long-term outcomes for the children and for the mothers. And the aspect that we're working on is they've got these cohorts, or these trials, I should say, and they want to do long-term follow-up of them. And so that what they want to do is link to the types of data sets that are in the IDI, but it works better for various reasons if we get direct access to the data from, for instance, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Social Development, that sort of thing. So that's what we're working on there. Inequality and service uptake. This is work that's funded by the Rockwool Foundation in Denmark. That's working with Sina Holt Anderson. And what we are looking at is the extent to which use of services, heavy use of services clusters in the same individuals. So the same individuals who use a lot of health services are also more likely to commit a crime or are on benefits for a long period of time. And we're working on we've got a paper submitted actually at the moment looking at associations between that and deaths of despair. So that's deaths from suicide, drug deaths and alcohol deaths. And we're also doing various other comparison work, which is kind of fun actually, doing comparisons between New Zealand and Denmark, who have slightly different social systems and welfare systems. So it's interesting to do comparisons there. That one I mentioned before, health impacts of playing rugby, that's led by Steph D'Souza. And what we're doing there is the New Zealand Rugby Union has data on people who played representative rugby from 1950 through to 2000, the last first year playing at 2000. That has been integrated into the IDI, and we've got a matched control group of everyone else in the IDI, more or less, and we're looking to see if there are differences in health outcomes and moving on social outcomes related to playing rugby. And there's a few things come out recently about neurodegenerative diseases, which is what Fran is actually working on for her master's as well, that we'll put something out probably next year. Te Hao Nui, that's with Andrew Spall. What we're doing there, and Charles Lee, who I mentioned before, is working quite closely on that one, is using IDI data to construct essentially a longitudinal study of Māori. So using both the longitudinal census and the integrated data infrastructure, and also working in data from Te Kupinga, where there's two Te Kupingas have been linked to the IDI, the 2013-2018, to construct a data set together of a Māori longitudinal study where other researchers and us later on can come along and do some research on. The one below that, that was an internally funded one. The FRDF is Faculty Research Development Fund, which they've now ditched and replaced with something else. So Comey there, Comey Kalando Matchett, has been working on those data using the International Social Survey Program data to put out some indicator reports comparing New Zealand to other countries, essentially, and she's put a few of those out already. Life course impact of chronic health conditions, that's what you're going to hear about shortly with Lisa and Offa. So Offa's going to be talking about the qualitative work that she's been doing with the Tokelauan community, and Lisa the quantitative work that she mainly has been doing in the integrated data infrastructure, looking at people with chronic conditions and how that's impacting their families, more or less. The Māori in between, this one led by Lara Greaves, who was a political scientist at the University of Auckland and used to be at Compass actually, gave a talk on this last year, talking about Māori who have few connections, whakapapa connections that they know about, or connections to iwi, or connections to te ao Māori, and how they are going in life essentially. Again, using IDI data. The one below that. So these are things that we're working on right at the moment. So you can see we're quite busy. The one below that, Informatics for Social Service and Wellbeing Data New Zealand. That's with Colin Simpson at Victoria University. We're doing a number of different things there. They're creating the widgets for the IDI is one thing, but we're also progressing. We run a couple of workshops actually on, and I'll touch on this a little bit later this afternoon, about what we consider to be the sort of underdeveloped governance and ethical infrastructure for governing the use of whole population data in New Zealand. And we've got a workshop coming up next year on what would an ideal data system look like in New Zealand. So that's following on from the discussion of ethics and governance. Te Ao Marama, it's a really interesting one we're working on there. We're just coming to the end of the data collection now. So we're running a survey of disability in the Māori community. So we surveyed from the electoral roll, and we're getting close to, I think the number's now 6,700 respondents to the survey, and looking at their perspectives on disability amongst those who have a disability. Loneliness across the life course, that is a project that's just sort of come to the end, but we're tidying up things on. That was funded by the Jeanette Crossley Foundation. Jeanette Crossley was a person who suffered from loneliness throughout her life, as well as various other medical conditions. And when she passed on, she left money to do some research into loneliness that we're doing a bit, well, we've done a little bit of work on. We've looked at trajectories of loneliness from childhood to adulthood, got a paper under revision now on outcomes of trajectories of loneliness. And we're also looking at the moment, doing a little bit of work on using the Dunedin study data on brain functioning, because I've got MRI data, brain functioning as a function of experiences of loneliness and social isolation across the life course. About which there's a little bit of research, but but not big enough, not as cohort as big as the Dunedin cohort is. And then finally, the Better Start National Science Challenge, which I'll talk about later this afternoon. That we work on with various people around the country in the areas of healthy weight, resiliency in teenage years, and successful learning. And we handle the big data analysis side of things. Okay. So, as I mentioned, We work a lot with the IDI, and you'll be hearing about this a bit through today's talks. So that's the IDI. So got whole population, individual level linking of people together at a de-anonymized de-anonymized fashion, and made available for research in a data lab, such as they have across the way here in New Zealand, and we have access to. And it means you can look at what's the health that has happened, or the health experiences that people have had, and how does that affect their income and other things later on by joining across different sectors. And I'll talk in my last talk this afternoon about the value I think that has for developmental research. Because we work in this area a lot, and we can see potentially ways it can be improved, we've created a few widgets in this regard, and I'm going to talk about the app later. The other thing that I am doing a little bit, for a while there quite obsessively, is just monitoring the reports that have come out using the integrated data infrastructure. And so anyone can access this via that website there. At the moment, it's got 612 items in there of IDI reports that are linked, so they're collected under journal articles, government reports, non-government reports, theses, of which there's a number coming out now, and also a number of non-empirical papers. So they're papers that don't use IDI data, but talk about the IDI. So the privacy impact assessments are all in there. One of the latest output checking guide is in there, and various other bits and pieces. Anyway, at some point or other, I'll get round to talking to people at various government ministries about how this can be supported, because I have best visibility, I think, of the journal articles because I know where to search. But the stuff that's coming out of government agencies, I find from time to time. But it'd be nice to have a champion in each of those agencies who can add things to this database so people can search amongst it and see what's in the IDI. Okay. So we work on the IDI, we do various surveys. I mentioned about the International Social Survey Program. Of course, it's family and gender roles this year, sorry. As you can see there, those are the last 11, well, from 2013 to 2022, the 10 surveys that are run in the National Social Survey Program. We've been involved since 2013, actually. So yes, this covers the time that Compass has been involved. You can see the planned one next year is a mix between the national identity and citizenship module, because they realized there was a lot of overlap between the two. And so that's what Comey and Martin are going to talk about later on in the early afternoon, later this morning, I think it is. We run the New Zealand election survey. Lara Greaves is heavily involved in that, where more or less on the day of the election, I think, a survey goes out to voters drawn from the electoral roll, ask them various questions about their voting patterns and other things about them. And these sorts of things are run around the world, actually. And so Victoria University, Jack Vowles is still the lead of the person, I think, running this, and we do the data collection side of things. And various other things, I mentioned the Te Ao Marama survey, just put in perspective of tangata whakaha Māori, which we're working on at the moment, and we're going to get some interesting findings out, I'm sure, over the next 6 months or so. And then we run a papakainga survey for Ngāti Hawa iwi, who are interested in the housing needs of their iwi. And so through a shared colleague, Marama Muru Lanning, they got in touch with us, and we helped them run a survey. And they've taken that away, and they're going to use that information to serve their iwi the best way they can. I'm impressed, actually, that you can almost read that, because I can hardly read that on my screen. But one of the other things we do is we run methodological short courses. Actually, on the back of your program, there's a list of all the methodological short courses that we run. We run them in November in Wellington, so we've got some coming up late November. And then February, just before teaching starts at the university, so sort of the last 2 weeks of February. List of the courses there, the ones that we at Compass are most closely involved with. We teach a course on the integrated data infrastructure, and also we've arranged for a person at the University of Melbourne to teach a course on SQL, which is what you need to know a little bit of if you use integrated data infrastructure. So it's another thing we do, and that's pretty much us.